Hi friends! Today I'll tell you a story about a boy named Tim. Tim lived in a big city with his mom, and they had just moved into a new apartment. His mom had found a new job, and Tim had to start at a new school. He wasn't very excited about it, but his mom always tried to cheer him up. "This is going to be great, Tim. You'll make lots of new friends," she said as they unpacked boxes. Tim nodded, but deep down, he was nervous. "I hope so," he whispered. That night, Tim went to bed as early as he could, not wanting to risk being late on his first day of his new school. The first day of school was the next day, and Tim had a hard time sleeping. He kept thinking about what his new classmates would be like. Would they like him? Would he make friends? The next morning, his mom made him breakfast. "You'll do fine," she said with a big smile. Although his mother's words were assuring, Tim still felt somewhat unsure of what to think of his first day at school. Tim gave a small smile back and left for school. It was a cloudy day, and the streets were busy with people hurrying to work. As Tim walked, he noticed something strange. He passed by a street that seemed completely empty. There were no cars, no people, not even any sound. All the other streets were busy, but this one was silent. Even though a voice in his head was literally begging him not to linger too close to the street, Tim stopped and looked down the street. Weird, he thought. He almost walked down it, but then he remembered he didn't want to be late for his first day of school. All day at school, Tim tried to focus on his lessons, but he couldn't stop thinking about the silent street. After school, instead of going straight home, he finally gave in. Something about Silent Street was calling to him. He decided to take a closer look. He found the street again. It was still just as empty and quiet. Curiosity got the best of him, and he stepped onto the sidewalk. The farther he walked, the stranger it felt. There were no people, no cars, no shops open. It was like this street was frozen in time. Suddenly, he heard a soft noise behind him. It was like someone whispering, but when he turned around, no one was there. Tim's heart raced. Something just didn't sit right with him about this street. Maybe this was a bad idea, he thought. He quickly turned around and started walking back toward the busier part of the city. But as he walked, the whispering grew louder. Tim, even though scared, decided enough was enough and he needed answers. "Who's there?" Tim called out, trying to sound brave. No answer. Tim started to run. The whispers turned into a low hum, and it felt like something was following him. He ran faster, and just as he was about to reach the end of the street, he bumped into someone. It was an old man pushing a cart filled with old things. Tim, scared and restless, was about to run the other way, but then the man looked at Tim and smiled. "You shouldn't be here, boy," he said in a raspy voice. "This street is not for you." Tim, out of breath, didn't know what to say. Why? What's wrong with it? The old man didn't answer right away. He leaned on his cart and squinted at Tim. "Do you know the story of this street?" he asked, his voice low. Tim shook his head. He hadn't heard anything about it. "No," he said. "What happened here?" The old man sighed. It's as if what he was about to tell Tim was taking a toll on him. A long time ago, this street was full of life. People lived here, worked here, walked these sidewalks just like any other part of the city. But then, one day, something strange happened. People started disappearing. "Disappearing?" Tim asked, his eyes wide. The old man nodded. "Yes, disappearing." No one could explain it. People would walk down the street and they'd never be seen again. It started with just one or two people, but then it kept happening. After a while, people were too afraid to come here. Tim shivered. What made them disappear? "No one knows for sure," the old man said, leaning closer. "But the whispers, people said they heard whispers just before they vanished." Tim felt a chill run down his spine. He thought about the strange whispers he had heard earlier. "Whispers?" he repeated. The old man nodded again. "Yes, whispers. People said they heard voices calling their names, like someone was trying to lure them deeper into the street. Some thought it was ghosts. Others thought it was something worse." Tim gulped. He suddenly felt like he didn't want to hear any more of the story, but at the same time, he was too curious to walk away. "What happened after that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The city tried to shut the street down," the old man continued. "But that didn't help. People still went missing. So eventually the street was forgotten. People stopped talking about it, stopped walking down it, and it just became silent." Tim glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. The street looked ordinary enough, but now it felt different, like it was watching him. "You should go home," the old man said, pulling his cart away. "Don't come back here, boy. This street isn't for you." Even though Tim didn't know the old man, he could tell the man was concerned for his well-being. Tim nodded, feeling his legs tremble. "I won't," he promised. Without another word, the old man walked away, his cart creaking as he disappeared around the corner. Something was telling him to run away, yet something was telling him not to believe what the old man had told him, begging Tim to explore Silent Street further. Tim stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. The silence around him seemed heavier now, and the whispers he had heard before were still echoing in his mind. He turned and ran home as fast as he could. That night, Tim couldn't stop thinking about the street. The old man's story haunted him, and he kept hearing the whispers in his head. But there was something else too. A strange pull. Even though he knew he shouldn't, part of him wanted to go back, to find out more about what had happened there. Always the curious type, Tim decided he had to uncover the mysteries of Silent Street once and for all. The next day at school, Tim couldn't concentrate. What secrets did it hold? Where did everyone end up? How was the old man even there if people were disappearing in the first place? He thought to himself. His mind kept drifting back to the Silent Street. After school, he found himself walking toward it again, his feet moving on their own. He didn't want to go, but something was drawing him in. When he reached the street, it was just as empty as before. The whispers started again, soft at first, but growing louder the farther he walked. He stopped in the middle of the street, feeling the weight of the silence all around him. As time passed, Tim felt more and more unwelcomed there, as if some strange spirit wanted him gone from Silent Street altogether. "Why am I here?" Tim whispered to himself. Suddenly he heard footsteps behind him. He spun around, but no one was there. His heart pounded in his chest. The whispers grew louder, calling his name. "Tim? Tim?" At first, Tim didn't believe his ears. He took it his paranoid mind playing tricks on him. But soon he realized that was not the case, and it truly was someone calling out using his name. He wanted to run, but his legs felt frozen. He was trapped. Just then, the old man appeared again, stepping out from a dark alley. "I told you not to come back," he said, shaking his head. Tim tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The whispers were drowning out everything else, filling his mind with fear. "You need to leave," the old man said, his voice urgent, "before it's too late." "I can't move," Tim whispered, his legs trembling. The old man grabbed Tim's arm and pulled him toward the end of the street. "Come on, boy! You don't belong here!" Tim stumbled forward, his feet finally responding. Together, they ran toward the busy part of the city. As they reached the end of the street, the whispers faded away and the noise of cars and people returned. Breathing hard, Tim looked back at the street. It looked normal again, just like any other street. But now he knew the truth. The old man let go of Tim's arm. "Don't come back here," he said quietly. "Not everyone gets away." Tim nodded, still catching his breath. "I won't," he promised again, and this time, he meant it. From that day on, Tim avoided the Silent Street. He walked to school a different way and never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, he could still hear the whispers in his dreams, calling his name, trying to lure him back. But he never went. Silent Street was not for him. And that's the end of Tim's story.